You went outside and walked. Maybe last week, maybe last month. You came home feeling decent about it, and your memory is still exactly the same. That is not because walking doesn't work. It is because almost nobody is ever told the one thing that determines whether that walk actually reaches your brain. The difference between a walk that changes nothing and a walk that physically reverses memory decline is not distance. It is not how long you walked. It is something most people would never think to consider. That is what this video is about. My name is Dr. Gloria Reed. I have spent over 2 decades studying brain aging and what actually works, not in theory, but on brain scans. If you want to know what I personally recommend as a nutritional support alongside this protocol, I left a link in the description. Now, here is what you can start tomorrow morning. Here is why that matters immediately. Movement at that pace triggers the release of a protein called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. BDNF is the primary signal your brain uses to grow new neurons and strengthen existing connections. At rest, your brain produces baseline levels of BDNF. At that specific walking pace, what exercise physiologists call Zone 2 cardio, production increases by 3 to 4 times. No supplement produces that response. No mental exercise produces it either. Movement does. The second piece. Do this walk in natural morning light, not indoors on a treadmill. Morning sunlight activates a pathway through the suprachiasmatic nucleus, your brain's internal clock, that primes the prefrontal cortex for the rest of the day. Light plus movement together produce a neurological state that either one alone does not. 20 minutes, outside, before breakfast. That is the action. Keep that in mind, because when I walk you through the full protocol later, this is the foundation that makes everything else work. Most people believe that exercise is good for the brain in a general, vague sort of way, the same way it is good for the heart or the joints, and that is not entirely wrong. But here is the part that changes everything, and that almost nobody explains. Exercise does not benefit the brain uniformly. The type of exercise matters, the pace matters, the time of day matters. And a 30-minute walk at the wrong pace, or the right pace but at the wrong time, produces a fraction of the neurological benefit that the correct combination produces. Most people who walk for their health are leaving the most important part of that walk on the table, every single day, because nobody ever told them what specifically to aim for. The villain in this story has a name: hippocampal atrophy, driven by sedentary lifestyle and low BDNF. Here is what that actually means. Your hippocampus is the region of the brain responsible for encoding new memories and retrieving old ones. It is one of only 2 regions in the adult brain where new neurons can still be generated, a process called neurogenesis. That process depends almost entirely on BDNF. When BDNF levels are chronically low, as they are in people who are mostly sedentary, neurogenesis slows, existing neurons lose their connections, and the hippocampus physically shrinks. Think of it this way. Your hippocampus is like a living library that is constantly adding new books and reorganizing old ones. BDNF is the library staff. When the staff is underfunded, when there are not enough of them, books stop getting filed, shelves go unorganized, and finding anything takes longer and longer. Over years, sections of the library close entirely. That is not a metaphor for forgetting things. That is the biological process. The consequence in daily life is specific. Names become harder to hold. Words arrive late in conversation. You remember the outline of something, but not the details. You read a paragraph and have to read it twice. That is a BDNF-depleted hippocampus showing its work. Before I go further, have you tried walking for your health before and felt like it did not really change anything mentally? Just comment yes or no below. because what comes next explains exactly why that may have happened and what was missing. Let me go deeper on the first mechanism, because understanding it changes how you think about every walk you take for the rest of your life. Every step you take in that specific zone, the pace where you can talk but feel slightly breathless, is like depositing money into your brain's savings account. BDNF is the currency. The hippocampus is the bank. After age 60, most people are making only withdrawals: stress, poor sleep, sedentary days, processed foods. This walk is the deposit. And like any savings account, what matters is not one large deposit. It is consistent deposits over time. Here is what the research says with specificity. A landmark 2011 study, led by Dr. Kirk Erickson at the University of Pittsburgh, followed 120 older adults over 1 year. Half were assigned to an aerobic walking program. The other half did stretching and toning only. At the end of the year, brain scans showed that the aerobic walking group had a 2% increase in hippocampal volume, not just a slowing of the 1% annual decline, an actual increase. The stretching group continued to lose volume at the normal rate. Dr. Erickson's conclusion was direct. Aerobic exercise reverses hippocampal shrinkage in older adults. 2% increase versus 1% annual loss in 12 months. That is a 3-point swing in the right direction from a walk. Now, here is where the ACAO_IMD8 you already have connects to this mechanism. The reason the walk works in the morning, specifically, outside, in natural light, has to do with a second pathway that amplifies the BDNF response. Morning sunlight exposure triggers cortisol in a healthy pattern, a natural, short-duration spike called the cortisol awakening response. When that spike happens during aerobic movement, it acts as a co-activator for BDNF synthesis. The two signals, movement and morning light, together instruct the brain to produce significantly more BDNF than movement in darkness or daylight without movement. The combination is the mechanism. Either one alone is less than half as effective. This is why people who walk on a treadmill in a gym at noon and people who walk outside in morning light, at the same pace, for the same duration, are having measurably different biological experiences in their hippocampus. Same steps, different outcome. The light is not incidental. It is part of the protocol. Connect this back to your daily experience. The reason words come back faster, the reason names start arriving on time again, the reason you feel mentally sharper through the morning, those are not coincidences. They are the hippocampus becoming incrementally better at doing its job, because the neurogenesis rate has begun to outpace the atrophy rate. That crossover does not happen overnight, but it happens, and it begins with day one of the walk. Seu ao amanhecer. Diagrama do sistema glymphático. Pessoa dormindo de lado. The second mechanism is one that almost no one mentions in conversations about exercise and brain health, and it explains why the timing of this walk matters more than most people realize. Your brain has a waste removal system called the glymphatic network. It operates primarily during deep sleep, flushing out metabolic byproducts, including beta amyloid, the protein associated with Alzheimer's, through channels that expand around blood vessels during slow-wave sleep. Most people know this part. What they do not know is that the glymphatic system's efficiency the following night is directly influenced by what happens in your first waking hour. Here is the connection. Morning light exposure sets your circadian rhythm by signaling the suprachiasmatic nucleus, a small cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus that acts as your body's master clock. When that clock is properly set in the morning, it coordinates the timing of your sleep architecture that night, the depth and duration of slow-wave sleep specifically. And slow-wave sleep is when the glymphatic system does most of its work. A well-set circadian clock means deeper, slow-wave sleep that night, which means better glymphatic clearance of toxic waste from the brain. Think of it this way. Your morning walk is not just a brain investment for today. It is setting the conditions for your brain to clean itself more effectively tonight. The walk primes the pump. Sleep is where the cleaning happens, but without the morning signal to set the clock, the cleaning crew arrives late, works a shorter shift, and leaves before the job is done. A 2019 study published in Current Biology, led by Dr. Sachin Panda at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies, confirmed that morning light exposure, specifically within the first hour of waking, produces the strongest circadian entrainment signal of the day, and that people who consistently get that signal show more regular and more restorative sleep architecture than those who receive it later or not at all. These two mechanisms do not work in isolation. They feed each other. BDNF production from Zone 2 walking directly supports neurogenesis. Circadian entrainment from morning light directly supports glymphatic clearance overnight. Together, they address the two core processes that reverse hippocampal decline, building new neurons during the day and clearing the debris that prevents existing neurons from functioning at night. Addressing only one produces partial results. Addressing both simultaneously is where the real shift happens. Before I walk you through the full protocol, I want to be direct with you. What I am describing is not a replacement for medical care. If you are managing a cardiovascular condition or any issue that affects your mobility, speak with your doctor before changing your exercise routine. What this protocol represents is an evidence-supported, low-risk addition for most healthy older adults, one that works alongside whatever you are already doing. Most people who try to use walking for brain health make one specific mistake that cancels the majority of the benefit. And it is not what you would expect. The mistake is pace. Specifically, walking too fast. This sounds backwards. More intensity should mean more benefit, right? That is not how BDNF production works. Zone 2 cardio, the pace where you can speak in full sentences but feel slightly breathless, is the precise range where BDNF synthesis is maximized. When you push above that zone into harder effort, your body shifts its metabolic priorities toward lactate clearance and anaerobic energy production. BDNF production actually drops as intensity increases beyond Zone 2. High-intensity walkers, joggers, and runners produce less BDNF per minute of exercise than someone walking at a sustained, moderate pace. Most people, when told to exercise for brain health, instinctively push themselves harder. That instinct, in this specific context, is wrong. The second mistake, almost as common, walking indoors. A treadmill in a basement or a gym removes the morning light signal entirely. You get movement, but you lose the circadian entrainment pathway. The glymphatic amplification effect that night is significantly reduced. Here is the correct way. The morning walk protocol, full execution. Wake up and do not check your phone. Before any screen exposure, put on your shoes and go outside. This matters because screen light, even morning smartphone light, partially activates the suprachiasmatic nucleus through a non-circadian pathway, blunting the clean signal you want from natural sunlight. Your first light of the day should be the sky. Walk for 20 minutes minimum, not 10, 20. The BDNF response builds progressively during aerobic exercise and reaches its peak expression somewhere between 15 and 25 minutes of sustained Zone 2 effort. Walks under 15 minutes do produce some BDNF, but they cut the response short before the synthesis cascade fully activates. 20 minutes is the functional minimum for the full effect. Maintain Zone 2 pace throughout. If you are talking to someone and you could deliver a full sentence without pausing for breath, you are walking too slowly. Add pace. If you cannot finish a sentence without needing a breath, you are above Zone 2. Slow down. The target is that specific middle band. You will feel slightly warm, slightly breathless, but comfortable enough to maintain a conversation. If you are alone, count breaths. You should be able to count to 5 in one exhale without straining. Do not wear sunglasses for the first 10 minutes. The circadian signal requires light to reach the retina directly. Sunglasses significantly reduce the lux intensity of that signal. After the first 10 minutes, use them if needed. The initial unfiltered exposure is what activates the pathway. Do not use headphones that block external sound. The auditory environment during a morning walk, birds, wind, ambient noise, activates the default mode network in ways that screens and audio content suppress. If you want to listen to something, keep one ear open and choose audio that does not require focused attention. The walk should be semi-passive, not task-demanding. Within 30 minutes of finishing the walk, consume protein. BDNF synthesis requires amino acids as substrate, specifically leucine and tryptophan. 2 eggs, a small serving of Greek yogurt, or a handful of walnuts and a glass of milk all meet the requirement. This is not optional if you want the full synthesis cycle to complete. Movement triggers the BDNF cascade. Protein provides the building material to close it. What to expect, honestly and specifically. By day 7, you will likely notice that your mornings feel more awake within the first hour of the day. Not dramatically, but consistently. The cortisol awakening response, properly timed with light and movement, produces a natural alertness that feels different from caffeine alertness. Sharper, not jittery. By day 14, most people begin noticing changes in word retrieval. The pauses get slightly shorter. Names arrive a little faster. This is the early sign that hippocampal function is improving. Not yet volume, but efficiency. Existing connections are being used more effectively because BDNF is optimizing them. By day 30, the cognitive benefit becomes something people around you may comment on before you fully articulate it yourself. Thinking feels cleaner. Recall feels more reliable. Some people describe it as the mental fog becoming less consistent, still present sometimes, but no longer every morning. That is a meaningful change. That is the mechanism working. Remember when I mentioned that 1% annual hippocampal loss, the number that most people absorb without knowing what to do with it? By day 30 of this protocol, the direction of that number has begun to reverse. Not completely, not permanently without ongoing consistency, but the trend line has changed. And that matters more than any single day. 3 supporting factors that amplify everything you just learned, each one in 3 sentences. First, sleep position. Sleeping on your left side increases glymphatic clearance by up to 25% compared to sleeping on your back, because of the way gravity assists cerebrospinal fluid flow through the glymphatic channels. Place a pillow behind your back to keep yourself from rolling over if needed. This is the single lowest effort brain health habit that almost no one uses. Second, a short walk after lunch. 10 minutes of walking after your largest meal of the day blunts the post-meal blood glucose spike that, when repeated daily, damages the small blood vessels that supply the hippocampus. Outside, if possible, the secondary light exposure reinforces your circadian signal. It takes less time than sitting with a second cup of coffee. Third, a specific breathing pattern before your morning walk. Before you step outside, spend 3 minutes breathing in for 4 counts and out for 6 counts. This activates the parasympathetic nervous system and lowers baseline cortisol before exercise begins, which means the cortisol awakening response during the walk is clean and proportionate, rather than elevated on top of already high stress cortisol. 3 minutes before you open the door. Here is what we covered today. Hippocampal volume declines 1% per year in sedentary adults. Zone 2 walking reverses that decline by stimulating BDNF-driven neurogenesis. Morning light amplifies the effect through circadian entrainment and glymphatic priming overnight. And the protocol is 20 minutes, outside, at moderate pace, before breakfast, followed by protein within 30 minutes. Your brain did not develop this problem in a week. It will not fully recover in a few days. That is biology, not failure. What the research shows is that consistent, targeted action over 30 to 90 days produces changes that are real, and that you will feel. If this helped you today, comment the word BRAIN below. It helps me understand what is working for the people watching, and it helps this information reach the people who need it most. In the next video, I'm going to show you why the stress you are carrying right now may be physically shrinking your hippocampus, and exactly what to do about it. The connection between cortisol and memory loss is more direct than most people realize, and most of it is reversible. Your brain is not broken. It adapted. And when you give it what it needs, it adapts back. Not instantly, but reliably. I will see you in the next one.